Hello, this is Waldemar Januszczak, art critic, producer and presenter of documentaries. Thanks for watching Perspective, YouTube's home for classical art.
Welcome to the ancient town of Rochester on Medway, Kent. We're here at Gad's Hill Place, now a girls' school, but once the home of the great novelist Charles Dickens. Dickens always coveted this house, from the time as a boy when he used to walk around this area with his father, and he finally bought it in 1856 and lived here until his death in 1870. It was here also that he wrote probably his most popular and enduring novel, Great Expectations, and it was in the villages and marshes around Rochester that he set much of the novel. In fact, Rochester is now the centre of the Dickens country. As well as Gad's Hill, Dickens lived in another house in the area, now privately owned. And in Rochester also there is the Dickens Museum and the Dickens Centre. And I intend to draw on these institutions to bring you what I hope will be a valuable and useful insight into the work of Britain's greatest novelist, Charles Dickens.
Great Expectations is much less blemished than any other Dickens novel. It's a very unified novel. There aren't many things you can spot wrong with it. And it's very intense. It doesn't stray off into less relevant matters. Everything is focused, and I think that's what makes it so great a novel.
Great Expectations is the story of Pip, a young orphan boy who is seized by the frightening figure of Magwitch, an escaped convict, early one morning in a graveyard.
Stop your noise! Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat.
Oh, don't cut my throat, sir! Pray, don't do it, sir!
Tell us your name, quick.
Pip, sir!
Hey, once more, give it a voice.
Pip, sir!
Now show us where you live. Now point out the place. Oh, you young dog. What fat cheeks you were, God darn me if I couldn't eat them, if I hadn't half a mind to it. Now looky here. Where's your mother?
There, sir! There, sir! Also, Georgiana, that's my mother.
Ah, and is that your father along of your mother?
Yes, sir. Him too, late of this parish.
Who do you live with now? Assuming you're kindly let to live, which I haven't made up my mind about yet.
My sister, sir, Mrs. Joe Gardry, wife of Joe Gardry, blacksmith.
Blacksmith, eh? Now looky here. The question being whether you be let to live. Now you know what a file is?
Yes, sir.
And you know what whittles is?
Yes, sir.
Well, you get me a file, and you get me whittles, and you bring them both to me, or I'll have your heart and your liver out. Now, what do you say, eh?
I'll get the file and the whittle, sir. I'll be here early in the morning.
Say, Lord, strike me dead if I don't. Now you remember what you undertook. You remember that young man. Now you get home.
Partly through fright, partly through pity, Pip agrees to help Magwitch by bringing him food and a file to help in his escape. Later, as a young man, Pip has wealth, education, gentlemanly status bestowed upon him by a mysterious benefactor. Now, Pip assumes his anonymous patron to be Miss Havisham, an eccentric and wealthy old lady who lives alone in a cobweb-filled mansion which she never leaves.
Miss Havisham is an extraordinary figure, and I think a very interesting figure, both in the history of the novel and structurally within this novel. I suppose the chief thing to be said about Miss Havisham is that, in contrast to Pip, she doesn't learn until too late. She is a wronged woman, and she responds to being wronged in an extraordinary and ultimately, when it comes down to it, wicked way, and she is stuck within that. She is imprisoned within a bizarre and evil response, and this imprisonment is represented by the time warp that she's in.
Now, the novelist and essayist G.K. Chesterton has said that Great Expectations is a novel without a hero, that the main character, Pip, doesn't initiate action, but rather has circumstances thrust upon him. I asked Thelma Grove, an international expert on Charles Dickens, what she thought of this view.
Well, I think Pip is an anti-hero. He starts off really in the mode of a Dickens child victim. He's physically abused by Mrs. Joe. He's bullied by Uncle Pumblechook. He's humiliated by Estella. He is, as he says, all this treatment has made him morally timid and very sensitive. He is very much at the mercy of other people's actions right through the novel. This is very true. G.K. Chesterton also said that Pip thinks that he's better than anybody else.
It's sometimes said that Great Expectations is a novel without a hero, but it does need to be seen in context, I think, because in a way, the whole history of the novel in the West is about dissolving the figure of the hero. Generally speaking, novels are not about the brave leader who defeats his enemies, gets the money and gets the girl. There are novels like that, and they can work very well. But generally speaking, the novel, the genius of the novel has been to show an individual, a fallible individual who makes mistakes, learns lessons the hard way, and becomes a better person. And that, of course, is eminently true of Pip.
We're outside Restoration House in Rochester. This was Charles Dickens' model for Satis House, the home of the mysterious Miss Havisham. In this scene, young Pip visits Satis House for the first time and meets Miss Havisham and Estella.
Come closer. Look at me. You are not afraid of a woman who has never seen the sun since you were born?
No.
Do you know what I touch here?
Yes, ma'am.
What do I touch here?
Your heart.
Broken. I am tired. I need diversion. And I'm done with men and women. Play. I sometimes have sick fancies. And I have a sick fancy that I want to see some play. Play! Play! Are you sullen and obstinate?
No, ma'am. I'm very sorry for you, and very sorry that I can't play just now. But if you complain of me, I'll be in trouble with my sister. So, I would do it if I could. But it's just that it's so new here, and so fine, and so strange, and melancholy.
So new to him, so old to me, so strange to him, so familiar to me, so melancholy to both of us.
Well, we know that actually Miss Havisham is thought to have been inspired by two actual women. There was a woman whom Dickens had seen as a child, dressed all in white. She was known as the White Woman of Berners Street, and she was obviously a mad woman. And he described her in an essay many, many years later called Where We Stopped Growing. There was another character, Martha Joachim, who shut herself off very like Miss Havisham after an unhappy love affair, and that was actually reported in Household Words very many years before Dickens had thought of Great Expectations.
Estella!
Yours, one day, my dear, and you will use it well. Let me see you play cards with this boy.
With this boy? Why, he's a common labouring boy.
Well, you can break his heart.
She did adopt Estella in the first place just to give a good home to a poor child, but she gradually began to develop this idea of bringing her up to wreak revenge on the male sex. And of course Pip comes into this because in the very first meeting, when Estella is objecting to Pip being a common labouring boy, Miss Havisham says, well, you can break his heart. And Pip is used as practice for Estella.
The distortion of Estella's moral values by Miss Havisham can be seen, but it's not consistent. I think one of the most interesting moments is after the comical fistfight between the infant Pip and the infant Herbert Pocket, and this, not to put too fine a point upon it, turns her on. There is a glow to her face, and she asks Pip, who is a trainee blacksmith, or has worked in the forge and is more than a match for the rather weedy Herbert Pocket, she asks him to kiss her on the cheek and takes pleasure from it.
I'm here in the grounds of the Charles Dickens Centre, and behind me is a Swiss chalet presented to Charles Dickens by one of his friends. This stood in the gardens of his home at Gad's Hill Place, and he used it as a study from 1865 until his death in 1870. It was, in fact, in the upper room that Charles Dickens wrote his very last words. Next scene that we're going to see is perhaps the most important in the book. It's the scene where Pip is visited at Joe Gargery's blacksmith by Lawyer Jaggers, who first tells him of his great expectations.
Well, Joseph Gargery, I am the bearer of an offer to relieve you of this young fellow, your apprentice. You would not object to cancel his indentures at his request and for his good. You would want nothing for so doing.
Lord forbid that I should want anything for standing in Pip's way.
The communication I have got to make is that this young fellow has great expectations. I'm instructed to communicate to him that he will come into a handsome property. Further, it is the desire of the present possessor of this property that he be immediately removed from his present sphere of life and from this place, and be brought up a gentleman. In a word, as a young fellow of great expectations.
Great Expectations is a kind of repudiation of the burning desire to improve oneself in the class scale. But it's fiction. It is fiction. Pip is down the class ladder from where Dickens was. Dickens was the son of a civil servant. Pip is an orphan being brought up by the village blacksmith. Dickens had a much better chance of getting into the middle class than Pip did. Pip could realistically have expected to have no chance at all. The fact that he does get a chance is luck. It's Dickens, I think, looking at his own life in a very different way, from a different perspective.
In this scene, all Pip's great expectations come crashing down when he finds that his mysterious benefactor is not, after all, Miss Havisham, as he had supposed, but Magwitch, the escaped convict he befriended so many years ago.
May I be so bold as to ask how you have done well since you and me was out on them lone, shivering marshes, eh?
How?
Aye.
I have been chosen to succeed to some property.
May a mere varmint ask, what property?
I don't know.
May a mere varmint ask, whose property? Well, could I make a guess, I wonder, at your income since you first come of age? As to the first figure now. 5? Concerning a guardian, well, there ought to have been some guardian or such like while you was a minor. Oh, some lawyer, maybe. Now, as to the first letter of that lawyer's name, would it be J? Put it as the employer of that lawyer whose name began with J and might be Jaggers. Yes, Pip, I made a gentleman of you. It was me that done it. I swore that time that sure as I ever made a guinea, that guinea should be yours. Now looky here, Pip, I'm your second father. You're my son, and more to me nor any son. I put away money so you could spend it. Oh. Look at you, dear boy. Look at these your lodgings of yours, fit for a lord. A lord. Oh, don't you mind talking, Pip. It's better that you should keep quiet, dear boy. You haven't slowly longed for this day as I have. You wasn't prepared for it as I was. But did you never think it was me?
No. No. No, never, never.
Well, you see, it was me, and single-handed. No one else but my own self, and Mr. Jaggers.
You can certainly isolate certain themes in Great Expectations. Class, clearly, is an important theme. Snobbery is an aspect of this. Money is an important theme. Crime and what you do with the criminal is an important theme. Perhaps one of the most important is forgiveness. I think it's very much a novel about forgiveness. Lots of people have to be forgiven. Pip has to ask forgiveness. Mrs. Joe has to ask forgiveness. Estella has to ask forgiveness. Miss Havisham has to ask forgiveness. And Magwitch is not really in a condition to ask it, but Pip asks it on his behalf.
I think a very strong theme is this idea of chains of events leading to catastrophic and unforeseen circumstances. Another strong theme, obviously, is penal reform, Dickens's interest with all kinds of penal reform. You have very graphic descriptions of the criminal law, of the conditions in Newgate. We know that the conditions on the prison hulks, which Dickens saw moored here in the river as a child, were very, very bad. And I think he has got a great deal of insight into characters such as Magwitch.
At last I done it, Pip. I done it. So, where am I to be put? I must be put somewheres, dear boy.
To sleep.
To sleep long and sound, because I've been sea-tossed and sea-washed months and months.
My friend and companion is away. You must have his room.
He won't be back tomorrow, will he?
Tomorrow? No.
Because I was sent for life. 'Tis death to come back. And there's been overmuch coming back of late years. I should have a certainty be hanged if took.
Well, to bed then. You should be comfortable in here.
Thank you.
I think Dickens' great skill in Great Expectations is while he shows Pip to be a coward, a snob, we still have a lot of sympathy for Pip. We still have a great feeling of sympathy for him.
Pip wants to be a gentleman, gets to be a gentleman freakishly, and finds it's not all it's cracked up to be. He has to learn lessons the hard way through suffering, and he has to learn more basic human values.
After the shock of Magwitch's confession that he is the true provider of Pip's great expectations, Pip returns to Satty's house to confront Miss Havisham and to declare his undying love for Estella.
And what wind blows you here, Pip?
Miss Havisham, I went to Richmond yesterday to speak to Estella, and finding that some wind had blown her here, I followed. What I had to say to Estella you shall hear presently, in a few moments. It will not surprise you. It will not displease you. I am as unhappy as you can ever have meant me to be. I have discovered who my patron is, and it is not a fortunate discovery. It is unlikely ever to enrich me in reputation, station, fortune, anything. There are reasons why I may say no more of this now. It is another's secret, not mine.
The relationship between Pip and Estella is very complicated. Pip is very attracted to Estella, partly because she seems to belong to a remote and glamorous class. He's also very attracted to that class, partly because Estella belongs to it.
The unhappy love affair of Pip with Estella may be mirroring Dickens's unhappy relationship with Ellen Ternan at this time. It may be that he feels that he has got involved in feelings towards a girl who is at this stage certainly repulsing him. But we are never going to know the truth, I don't think, of the Ellen Ternan episode. But it may well be that Estella is one of the heroines who is perhaps drawing some of her qualities from Ellen Ternan.
Estella? You know I love you. You know that I have loved you long and dearly. I should have said this sooner, but for my long mistake. It induced me to think that Miss Havisham meant us for one another. While I knew that you were not yourself, so to speak, I refrained from saying it, but I shall say it now. Although I know that I have no hope of ever calling you mine, I still love you. I have loved you ever since I first saw you here. It would have been cruel, horribly cruel of Miss Havisham to have practiced on the susceptibility of a poor boy and to torture me through all these years with a vain hope and an idle pursuit. If she had reflected on the gravity of what she did. But I think she did not. I think in the endurance of her trial, she forgot mine.
It seems that there are sentiments which I am not able to comprehend. When you say you love me, I know what you mean as a form of words, but nothing more. You address nothing in my heart, you touch nothing there. I don't care for what you say at all. I've tried to warn you of this, have I not?
Yes.
But you would not be warned, for you thought I did not mean it.
I thought and hoped you could not mean it. You, so young, untried and beautiful. Estella, it's not in nature.
It is in my nature. It is in the nature formed within me.
Is it not true that Bentley Drummle is in town and pursues you, and that you encourage him and ride out with him, and that today you dine with him?
It is quite true.
Oh, you cannot love him. You would not marry him.
Why not tell you the truth? I am going to be married to him.
She's always attracted to Pip, but her training, her corruption, if you like, by Miss Havisham, leads her to have other values. She tries to protect Pip against his attraction to her. Doesn't succeed, of course. Pip, in a doomed way, yearns for her and is devastated when she marries Bentley Drummle, but she is punished by her marriage to Bentley Drummle. Like so many of the characters in the novel, she is scourged through actual physical injury. Bentley Drummle beats her, and the scourging leads her to ask for forgiveness.
Pip has this illusion, fostered of course as we've seen by Miss Havisham, that Estella actually is intended for him. He feels when he he actually totally believes that Miss Havisham is the founder of his fortunes, he thinks that Estella is part of the deal. And therefore, he tends not to press her, not to hold back, not to be hurt by her coldness.
Were I to remain in England, how could I see you as Drummle's wife?
Nonsense. You will get me out of your thoughts in a week.
Out of my thoughts? You are part of my existence. You are part of myself. You have been in every line that I have read since I first saw you here. That poor, common boy whose heart you wounded even then. You have been the embodiment of every graceful fancy that my mind has taken since then. Estella, to the last hour of my life, you cannot help but remain part of my character. Part of the little good and part of the evil. But in this separation, I hold you faithfully only with the good. For it cannot be that you have done me more good than harm. Let me now feel what sharp distress I may. God bless you. God forgive you.
I think Great Expectations is the least imperfect of Dickens's novels. Dickens's novels are really quite extraordinary in many ways. All of them have faults in them, which it's quite easy to spot. But somehow, despite that, they're often so very much better than faultless novels.
On the whole, I think I agree with G.K. Chesterton, who says of Great Expectations, it has a quality of serene irony and even sadness, which puts it quite alone among his other works. It is a study in human weakness and the slow human surrender.
Oh, Estella. Estella, you were never designed for me. Miss Havisham's intentions towards me were but a mere dream. I only suffered in Sartis house as a convenience, a sting for the greedy relations. A model with a mechanical heart for them to practice on when no other practice was at hand. Poor Joe. Whom I deserted falsely on a second thought. How can I ever undo what I've done?